What if the most powerful response to disrespect isn't loud? What if it has nothing to do with clever words or perfect comebacks? Epictetus, the great Stoic philosopher, once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." But most people miss the deeper lesson: how to not react, how to disappear, detach, and let your absence become the most piercing response of all. When someone disrespects you, your instincts scream for retaliation. You want to defend yourself, prove a point, maybe even humiliate them enough so they never dare again. But Stoicism teaches us something deeper. The ultimate power lies not in what you say, but in what you silently remove. Your energy, your presence, your emotional availability. If this message already resonates, take a second to like this video right now. If you want to know the exact silent moves that shake people's souls, stay until the end because I'm revealing tactics that change everything without you ever raising your voice. This message is for anyone who's ever been disrespected, overlooked, or underestimated. We're about to break down 5 silent moves that shift the power dynamic completely without you ever explaining yourself. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And today, you're going to reclaim that mastery. Real power doesn't need permission. It only needs presence. And today, you're learning how to use yours. Silent move 1. Withdraw access without explanation. There's a moment, a quiet one, when you realize the most powerful thing you can do isn't raise your voice or explain yourself one more time. You stop showing up, not out of spite, not to prove a point, but because you finally understood something most people never will. Your energy is not a public service. When someone repeatedly disrespects you, they're depending on your silence to keep doing it. They assume you'll stay, that your kindness, your patience, your emotional labor will always be there, waiting for them. They bank on your consistency because it benefits their chaos, and that's exactly why withdrawal, complete, silent, unannounced, is so powerful. Epictetus believed that true strength is found not in controlling others, but in mastering yourself. He taught that we suffer not from the events themselves, but from our judgments about them. When you pull away, not angrily, not dramatically, but quietly, you shift the emotional dynamic in a way they never expected. You are removing their access to your presence. And in doing so, you force them to face the one thing they've avoided all along: themselves. Most people live in patterns. They expect certain emotional reactions, they expect arguments, tears, explanations, because those things give them power. But when you disappear from that pattern, you create a silence that becomes psychologically unbearable. Suddenly they have no one to perform for, no one to manipulate, no one to blame. And this, Epictetus would argue, is where their real suffering begins. Your absence becomes a mirror, one they can no longer escape. A mirror that doesn't shout or judge, it reflects. And without the noise of your justifications clouding their perception, they're left with nothing but the image of their own behavior staring back at them. Comment, "My silence is my strength," if you've ever let someone take your presence for granted and you're done with it. I read every comment and want to know your thoughts. Instead of retaliating, you're rising. You're not engaging in petty revenge or emotional games. You're protecting your inner peace. You're stepping back because your presence was never meant to be taken for granted. Epictetus reminds us that the key is to keep company only with people who uplift you, whose presence calls forth your best. When someone fails to meet that standard repeatedly, Stoicism doesn't tell you to fight. It tells you to walk away with clarity, not noise. And let's be honest, it's hard, especially when the disrespect comes from someone close, a friend, a sibling, a partner. The desire to fix it, to explain your pain, to get closure, all of that is real. But that's also where you learn the difference between ego and wisdom. The ego wants to be understood. Wisdom wants peace. And the Stoics always chose peace, even when it hurt. Why? Because that pain of detachment is temporary. The pain of staying somewhere you're not valued, that's corrosive. You may feel like disappearing is weak, that by walking away you're letting them win. But Epictetus would challenge that completely. He'd ask, if someone has harmed you, why add to the injury by remaining entangled? And he'd be right. By staying, you become complicit in your own disrespect. By leaving, you reclaim your sovereignty. Your absence becomes not an act of cruelty, but one of sacred preservation. You are no longer performing emotional labor for people who refuse to grow. When you walk away without explanation, they remember you differently. Not as angry, not as broken, but as someone who had the strength to say nothing and still be heard. Over time, your silence will echo louder than any final conversation, because while they expected you to beg, you vanished. While they assumed you'd come running, you never looked back. And in that haunting silence, the regret begins. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe right now because I post content like this every week. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Hit that subscribe button. Silent move 2. Level up in private. One of the most misunderstood forms of power is growth in silence. In a world obsessed with proving, posting, and performing, choosing to evolve privately is rare and threatening, especially to those who once disrespected you. The same ones who dismissed you, doubted you, or disrespected you were counting on you staying stuck. They needed you predictable. They relied on your wounds to keep you visible, reactive, and emotionally accessible. But what happens when you suddenly stop showing up the way they expect? What happens when your life begins to move without them and you don't say a word? Epictetus taught that everything external, status, praise, even disrespect, is beyond our control. But what is within our control is our inner life, our choices, and our direction. When you begin to focus on your own psychological space without needing to explain or defend yourself, you enter what Epictetus would call true freedom. And make no mistake, this unnerves people. They may pretend not to notice your silence, but they do. They feel it because suddenly you're no longer orbiting around their moods, their needs, their drama. You've stepped into your own gravitational field and it shakes them in ways they can't name. At first, they'll tell themselves you're going through a phase, that you'll come back like you always did. But Stoic discipline is not a mood. When that shift becomes consistent, their certainty begins to unravel. You're not posting about your next move, you're not clapping back, you're simply disappearing from the emotional stage they used to control. And that silence, it grows heavier with time because you're not withdrawing, you're transforming. Not loudly, not with applause, but deeply, inwardly, consistently. Comment "I grow in silence" if this principle applies to you. I want to see those comments flooding in. While they're watching, waiting for a sign of weakness, waiting for your return, you're building. You're reading, you're reflecting, you're investing in your health, your goals, your growth. You're doing the kind of work that doesn't get likes or comments, but that turns silence into a storm. They can't place you anymore. The version of you they knew doesn't exist. The old patterns don't apply. You don't argue like you used to. You don't respond to bait. You don't even make eye contact in the same way. Your energy no longer orbits them. And that unpredictability, that quiet shift in power, is psychologically destabilizing to those who once thrived on your emotional predictability. Epictetus believed that freedom is the only worthy goal in life, and this is what freedom looks like. Moving in silence, growing in depth while others are still trying to provoke a reaction that no longer exists. Real success doesn't need witnesses. The most powerful revenge isn't a comeback speech. It's a quiet life built with intention. Epictetus would say, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it," and you are. Every time you grow in silence, you embody restraint, discipline, clarity, everything the Stoics valued. You stop defending your worth, and you start becoming undeniable. They'll notice, not all at once, but in small, unsettling ways. In your posture, your pace, your peace, the way you no longer flinch when they enter the room, the way your smile doesn't need their approval. And over time, they'll begin to realize they lost access to a version of you they never valued. Silent move 3. Become emotionally unavailable. There comes a point when your silence stops being a pause and becomes a decision. Not a dramatic one, not loud or vindictive, but deliberate. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself. You no longer respond to provocations. You've stepped out of the emotional ring entirely. And people notice. The ones who once pushed your buttons, who expected you to react on cue, they sense the difference. Not because you told them, but because your detachment makes their chaos echo louder in the absence of your participation. This is what Epictetus would call emotional sovereignty, the refusal to allow others to dictate your state of mind. If you're getting value from this, make sure you've hit that like button right now, and if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. Don't wait. Most people live their lives handing out emotional access like free samples, reacting to every opinion, every criticism, every petty jab. But what Stoicism teaches us is that true composure is not about suppression, it's about regulation, seeing the storm and refusing to become it. When someone disrespects you, they often expect a script to play out. They expect the raised voice, the defensive text, the long explanation because that reaction feeds them. It confirms they still have power over you. And when you stop giving them that, when you stay composed, when you vanish emotionally, they start to unravel. Emotional unavailability doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means your emotions are no longer accessible to people who haven't earned the right to touch them. You no longer attend every argument you're invited to. You no longer offer explanations to people who never listened in the first place. Silent move 4. Enforce boundaries silently. There's a quiet kind of power that comes from setting boundaries and never explaining them. Not because you owe no one clarity, but because the people who care about you won't require explanations for your self-respect. Your peace doesn't need their permission. It only needs your decision. And that decision is best made in silence. True boundaries are not about teaching others. They're about teaching yourself what you will and will not allow. Silent move 5. Disappear with dignity. There comes a time when silence is survival. When someone continues to disrespect you, test your boundaries, ignore your value, and still expects your loyalty, the wisest thing you can do is leave. Not with a grand exit, not with final words, emotional confrontations, or dramatic closure. Leave quietly, completely, and with dignity. When you disappear from a situation that continuously dishonors your worth, you're not running away, you're returning to yourself. Your absence speaks louder than anything you could say. While they expected a reaction, you gave them stillness. While they anticipated an explanation, you offered none. That emptiness, that silence, forces them to face their own behavior in a way your words never could. If this video helped you see your worth more clearly, smash that like button right now. Comment below with "My silence is my power," so I know this reached you. And don't go anywhere because I've got another video for you on the screen right now about how most people react, but Stoics choose. Click that video to keep this momentum going. You don't need to say a word. You are the message.